Snow fell in soft, silent spirals over the marketplace of Varello's Hollow, a village nestled in the high valleys of the frozen moon of Xyrus. The air shimmered with cold so sharp it seemed to cut breath into mist before it could escape the lungs. Stalls lined the cobbled lanes, some draped in synth-fir canopies, others built from salvaged starship hulls, but most were shuttered now, their owners long gone to warmer hearths. Only the glow of a few bioluminescent lanterns clung to life, casting pale blue halos over frost-rimed crates and discarded ration wrappers. In the alley behind the old synth noodle cart, a tiny figure crouched beside a dented waste bin, her small hands trembling as she dug through frozen refuse. Her skin was the color of moss after rain, soft green, almost luminous against the white snow, and her hair, stark white and fine as spun frost, clung to her cheeks in damp strands. She wore a tattered thermal wrap far too large for her narrow frame, its hem dragging in slush, and her boots, patched with polymer tape, crunched softly with each shift of her weight. Her name was Lyra, and she was searching for food for her mother. Not for herself. Never for herself. Her stomach had long since learned silence, but her mother's cough had grown worse in the past week. A wet, rattling sound that shook their tiny shelter like a dying engine. The med clinic had turned them away again. No credits, no care, the attendant had said, not unkindly but firmly, as if reciting a law written in stone. Lyra had nodded, eyes dry then, because crying wasted warmth. Now, she pawed through the icy trash with numb fingers, hoping for a half-eaten nutrient bar, a discarded protein pouch, anything that hadn't frozen solid or spoiled beyond salvage. Her breath came in short puffs, each one a ghost in the dark. Across the square, a man stood beneath the awning of a shuttered spice stall, watching. He wasn't from Xyrus. His build was broader, his coat thicker than local fashion allowed, and his boots left deep prints in the fresh snow. His name was Torin Vel, though no one here knew it. He'd come to Varello's Hollow chasing rumors of a lost cargo haul, illegal biomods smuggled off a derelict freighter, but the trail had gone cold, and so had his funds. He'd sold his plasma torch 2 days ago just to afford a cot in the back room of the inn. Hunger gnawed at him too, but not like this. Not like the quiet desperation he saw in that child's hunched shoulders. He hesitated. Getting involved was dangerous. Xyrus was neutral territory, but tensions ran high between the native Xyrians and offworlders since the resource accords collapsed. A human helping an alien child? That could draw eyes, some of them armed. Still, something in the girl's posture, the way she flinched at every distant footstep, hooked into his chest like a barb. He sighed, the sound lost in the wind, and stepped forward. Lyra heard him before she saw him, the crunch of snow under heavy boots. She froze, fingers curling around a half-crushed tube of synth jelly. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Humans rarely came this deep into the market after curfew. Most avoided Xyrians altogether, calling them glow eyes or worse. She didn't turn. If she stayed still, maybe he'd pass by. Maybe. But the footsteps stopped right behind her. "You'll catch frostbite digging bare-handed like that," the man said, his voice rough but not unkind. Lyra didn't answer. She squeezed the jelly tube. It was still pliable. Maybe enough for one meal. She tucked it into her wrap. "I've got a thermos of broth," he continued, crouching slowly, as if approaching a startled animal. "Real broth, not the reconstituted sludge they sell at the stalls. Got it from old Marna at the inn. She throws in extra root chunks if you smile at her right." Lyra finally turned. Her eyes were wide, almond-shaped, and the color of amber lit from within. She studied him, the lines around his eyes, the chapped skin of his hands, the way his coat hung loose on his frame. He looked hungry too. Why would a hungry man offer food? "Why?" she whispered, her voice thin as ice. Torin shrugged. "Because someone once did the same for me. On a rock colder than this one." He unscrewed the thermos and held it out. Steam curled from the opening, carrying the scent of herbs and slow-cooked marrow. Lyra's stomach growled so loudly she flinched. She didn't take it. "My mom. She's sick. She needs it more." Torin's expression softened. "Then we'll bring it to her." That wasn't what she expected. She blinked. You'll come with me? "Only if you promise not to lead me into a trap," he said, half joking. But his eyes scanned the alley anyway. Paranoia was a survival skill. Lyra almost smiled. Almost. No traps. Just cold. She led him through winding backstreets, past leaning shanties built from scrap metal and repurposed cryopods. The village climbed the hillside like a stubborn weed, each home clinging to the next for warmth. At the top, tucked beneath the skeletal branches of a dead sky oak, stood their shelter. A dome of fused polymer sheets, patched with reflective foil and sealed with resin. A single biolight flickered inside. Her mother lay on a pallet of woven thermal fibers, wrapped in every blanket they owned. Her skin was the same green as Lyra's, but dull now, sallow. Her white hair fanned across the pillow like spilled milk. She stirred as they entered, coughing weakly. "Lyra?" Her voice was a thread. "I brought help," Lyra said, kneeling beside her. She took the thermos from Torin and carefully poured a small amount into a chipped cup. The steam fogged her mother's face. Torin hung back near the door, suddenly unsure. He wasn't a healer. He wasn't even a good man most days. But the woman's eyes, so like her daughter's, locked onto his, and in them he saw not suspicion, but gratitude so deep it made his throat tight. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded, unable to speak. Over the next few days, Torin returned. Not out of charity, though that played a part, but because he had nowhere else to go, and because Lyra's quiet determination reminded him of someone he'd lost long ago. He brought firewood scavenged from a derelict shuttle, a working heat coil traded for a spare power cell, and once, miraculously, a sealed medpack he'd won in a dice game at the tavern. The fever broke. The cough lessened. Color returned to the mother's cheeks. Her name was Selah. She'd been a botanist once, before the corporate wars burned through Zyrus's greenhouses and turned fertile valleys to dust. Now she taught Lyra the old songs, the ones about starseeds and sky rivers, while mending nets for the ice fishers. Torin found himself lingering after his deliveries, sitting by their small heater, listening. He told them stories too, of asteroid belts where ships sailed like ancient galleons, of cities built inside hollowed comets, of a dog he'd had on Mars that could smell water through 3 layers of rock. Lyra laughed at that last one, a sound like wind chimes in summer. But peace on Zyrus was always borrowed. One evening, as Torin helped Selah reinforce the shelter's roof against an incoming blizzard, armored figures appeared at the edge of the clearing. They wore the black and silver insignia of the Krell Syndicate, mercenaries turned enforcers, now hunting anyone who might know about the missing biocargo. Rumor had it the shipment contained neural graphs capable of rewriting memory, and the Syndicate wanted it back before rival factions got wind. "You!" their leader barked, pointing a pulse rifle at Torin. "Torin Vel, you've been asking questions." Torin stepped in front of Selah and Lyra. "I've been asking about soup recipes. Try the noodle cart." The mercenary sneered. "Don't play dumb. We traced your comm signature to this sector. Hand over the data chip, or we burn this hovel to the ground." "I don't have it," Torin said evenly. And it was true, he'd never found the chip. The whole lead had been a dead end. But they wouldn't believe him. Lyra clutched her mother's hand, eyes wide with terror. She'd seen what the Syndicate did to dissenters. Last winter, they'd executed a traitor for hoarding thermal cells. His body hung in the square for 3 days. As the mercenary raised his weapon, Lyra did something reckless. She darted forward, small and fast as a snow hare, and threw a handful of powdered frost spice, harvested from the sky oak bark, into the man's face. It wasn't lethal, but it burned like acid in the eyes. The mercenary roared, stumbling back. His comrades raised their weapons. "Run!" Torin shouted, grabbing Lyra and shoving her toward the tree line. Selah followed, limping but determined. They fled into the storm. The blizzard swallowed them whole, wind howling, snow blinding, cold biting through layers of cloth. Torin led them down a hidden path only locals knew, a tunnel beneath the ice used by smugglers and rebels. It opened into a network of caves beneath the village, warmed by geothermal vents. They collapsed in a chamber lit by glowing fungi, gasping, shaking. "You shouldn't have done that," Torin said to Lyra, not angry, just weary. "She was going to shoot you," Lyra replied, teeth chattering. "And now they'll hunt us all," Selah added softly, wrapping her daughter in a blanket. Torin rubbed his face. "I'm sorry. I brought this on you." Selah reached out, touched his arm. "You brought us broth when we had nothing. That matters more." In the days that followed, they lived like ghosts. Torin used his old contacts to send coded messages, false trails, decoys, while Selah brewed healing tonics from cave lichen and taught Lyra how to move silently over ice. The girl proved quick, clever, her small size an advantage in tight spaces. She mapped the tunnels, found hidden exits, even set simple traps with frozen wires and loose rocks. Meanwhile, the Syndicate tightened its grip on Varello's Hollow. Curfew extended. Rations cut. Informants paid in heat credits. Fear thickened the air like smoke. But Torin had one last card to play. Before coming to Xyrus, he'd worked with a resistance cell on Ceres. One of their members, a hacker named Jax, owed him a favor. Torin sent a burst transmission through a smuggled relay node. Need a ghost. Syndicate's hunting phantom cargo. Make them believe it's real, and that it's headed to the orbital dock. 2 nights later, chaos erupted. False signals lit up Syndicate scanners. Fake cargo manifests appeared on black market feeds. A decoy shuttle launched from the far ridge, drawing half the mercenaries into pursuit. In the confusion, Torin led Sayla and Lyra back to the surface, not to flee, but to fight back. Because the truth was, Torin hadn't been chasing the biocargo at all. He'd been chasing the man who'd stolen it. A former Syndicate scientist named Dr. Wren, who'd hidden the neural grafts not for profit, but to keep them from being weaponized. And Wren, it turned out, had taken refuge in Varello's Hollow months ago. Disguised as the old noodle vendor, Marna's husband. Torin found him in the cellar beneath the noodle stall, surrounded by humming servers and cryotubes filled with glowing blue fluid. They're not memory grafts, Wren whispered, eyes wild. They're empathy amplifiers, designed to make soldiers feel the pain of those they kill. The Syndicate wanted to destroy them, too unstable for warfare. Torin understood then. This wasn't just cargo. It was hope. With Lyra's help, they used her small hands to bypass security locks. They moved the cryotubes into the tunnel network. Sayla coordinated with other villagers, those tired of Syndicate rule. A quiet rebellion sparked in the snow. The final confrontation came at dawn. The remaining Syndicate forces, realizing they'd been duped, stormed the village. But they found empty homes and silent streets. Then, from the caves, the villagers emerged. Not with weapons, but with the truth. Lyra stood at the front holding a single activated neural graft. She didn't use it on them. She offered it. Feel what you've done, she said, voice clear despite the cold. Feel the hunger, the fear, the love you've crushed. The lead mercenary hesitated. Then slowly he reached out. What happened next wasn't violence, but transformation. The graft didn't control, it revealed. Men who'd burned homes wept for the families they'd displaced. Orders were questioned. Loyalties fractured. By midday, the Syndicate presence on Xyrus had collapsed, not by force but by conscience. In the aftermath, Torin stood once more in the marketplace, now bustling with life. Stalls reopened. Children played in the snow. Sayla and Lyra walked beside him, their steps lighter, their faces turned toward the weak but warming sun. You'll stay? Lyra asked, not looking at him. Torin smiled. For a while. Someone's got to teach you how to hotwire a skiff. Lyra grinned, her white hair catching the light like spun starlight. And in that moment, amidst the snow and the steam and the quiet hum of a village healing, something new began. Not an ending, but a fragile, fighting chance at something better. Weeks passed, and the thaw came not just to the land, but to the hearts of Varello's Hollow. The Syndicate's shadow had lifted, but its echoes lingered, in the wary glances of elders, in the way children still flinched at the sound of heavy boots, in the empty stalls where traders once stood. Yet life, stubborn and bright, pushed through the cracks. Sayla began replanting the old greenhouse domes with frost-resistant tubers and sky moss, her hands no longer trembling but steady with purpose. Lyra helped, of course, but she also spent hours with Torin, learning not just how to rewire a skiff's ignition coil, but how to read star charts, how to patch a hull breach with polymer foam, how to tell a friendly signal from a trap. Torin, for his part, found himself changing too. The restless edge that had driven him from port to port, the itch to outrun his past, had softened. He still woke some nights with sweat on his brow, dreaming of fire and falling ships, but now there was a warm light in the next room, and the soft murmur of Sayla singing old Xyrian lullabies. He didn't call it home. Not yet, but he stopped checking departure schedules. Then the signal came. It arrived not through official channels, but through a coded ping buried in a weather buoy's transmission. A trick Jax had taught him years ago. 3 pulses, then silence. Emergency protocol. Torin recognized it instantly. It meant Jax was in trouble. And if Jax was in trouble, the whole sector might be. He didn't tell Sayla or Lyra at first. He sat by the heater that night, staring at the flickering biolight, turning the message over in his mind like a stone. He could ignore it. He owed Jax nothing he hadn't already repaid tenfold. But Jax had once pulled him from a burning wreck on Titan, dragging him through smoke and shrapnel with a broken arm. Debt wasn't the right word. It was kinship. The next morning, Lyra found him packing a satchel with rations, a plasma cutter, and a spare comm unit. "Where are you going?" she asked, voice flat. Torin didn't look up. "A friend needs help. You're leaving. I'll come back. You said that to someone else once, didn't you?" Her eyes held no accusation, just quiet knowing. Torin paused. "Yes. And they didn't believe you." He finally met her gaze. "No." Lyra stepped forward and placed a small, carved stone in his hand. It was smooth, shaped like a teardrop, etched with Xyrian runes. "It's a sky anchor," she said. "My grandmother gave it to my mother. It doesn't keep you from flying away, but it helps you find your way back." Torin closed his fingers around it. It was warm, as if holding sunlight. Sayla appeared in the doorway, arms crossed, but her expression was calm. "You go," she said. "But you remember, this door stays open. For as long as it takes." He nodded, throat tight. He left at dusk, riding a borrowed ice skiff across the frozen flats toward the orbital relay station. The journey was quiet. The only sound the hum of the engine and the whisper of wind over snow. But halfway there, the sky split open. Not with storm, but with ships. 3 sleek, obsidian cutters descended from the upper atmosphere, their hulls shimmering with active camouflage. Krell Syndicate insignia glowed faintly on their wings. They hadn't left Xyrus after all. They'd been waiting, watching, and now they knew Torin was moving. He cursed, slamming the skiff into evasive mode. Ice cracked beneath the runners as he veered into a canyon, the cutters peeling off in pursuit. Pulse fire scorched the cliffs above him, sending shards of frozen rock crashing down. He couldn't outrun them. Not in this. Then, a voice crackled over his comm. Not Jax's, but Lyra's. "Torin, switch to channel Delta 9. Now." He flipped the switch. Static, then a burst of high-frequency noise that made his teeth ache. The cutters behind him wobbled, their targeting systems glitching. One veered wildly into a spire and exploded in a silent bloom of fire against the snow. "What did you do?" he shouted. "Mama and I hacked the village's old defense grid," Lyra replied, pride threading her voice. "It's weak, but it scrambles sensors for 10 seconds. Use it." He did. He shot through a narrow ice tunnel, the remaining cutters too large to follow. When he emerged on the other side, they were gone. For now. At the relay station, he found Jax not in the control room, but chained in a cargo bay, blood drying on his temple. The real trap hadn't been for Torin, it had been for Jax. The Syndicate had traced the false signal back to him. They wanted the location of the empathy grafts, and they believed Jax knew. "They're going to weaponize them," Jax rasped as Torin cut his bonds. "Not destroy them. Reverse the polarity. Turn empathy into agony. Make people feel unbearable pain just by looking at an enemy. A psychic plague." Torin's blood ran colder than Xyrus snow. "Where are they building it?" "Orbital Forge. Station K7. Launching in 48 hours. They had no ship, no army, no time. But Torin had something better. He sent a single message, not to allies, not to mercenaries, but to Varello's Hollow. Back in the village, Lyra received it. She didn't hesitate. She ran to the central square, climbed onto the old noodle cart, and rang the skybell, a relic from the days before the wars, used only in times of true need. Its tone, deep and resonant, echoed through every home, every tunnel, every heart. One by one, the villagers emerged. Not with guns, but with tools, with knowledge, with courage. Sayla activated the greenhouse comms array, boosting its range with scavenged satellite parts. Old Marna rerouted power from the thermal vents. Teenagers jury-rigged drones from delivery bots. Even the ice fishers offered their submersibles, modified to breach low-orbit docking clamps. They weren't soldiers. They were bakers, botanists, tinkerers, mothers, children. But they had something the Syndicate had forgotten: unity. Within hours, a ragtag fleet assembled in the frozen bay. 6 skiffs, 2 cargo haulers, 3 patched-together drones, and 1 ancient mining tug with a reactor held together by hope and duct tape. Torin stood at the helm of the lead skiff, Lyra beside him, Sayla coordinating from the ground. "You sure about this?" he asked her. Lyra tightened her gloves. "They hurt my mom. They hurt our home. And they think empathy is weakness." She looked at him, eyes blazing. "Let's show them what it really is." The ascent was brutal. Anti-orbit turrets opened fire as they breached the atmosphere. 1 skiff went down, spiraling into the clouds. Another lost power, drifting into the void. But the rest pressed on, weaving through debris and fire. At Station K7, chaos reigned. The Syndicate hadn't expected resistance, not from a moon of farmers and scavengers. The villagers' drones swarmed the docking arms, frying control panels with electromagnetic pulses. The mining tug rammed the main airlock, creating a breach. Inside, Torin and Lyra moved like shadows. She was small enough to slip through maintenance shafts, disabling security nodes with her nimble fingers. He fought when he had to, but more often he talked, reminding guards of their own families of the cost of cruelty. Some lowered their weapons. Others ran. They found the core chamber deep in the station's heart. There, suspended in a web of cables and coolant tubes, pulsed a massive neural matrix, the empathy weapon nearly complete. A single activation sequence away from unleashing psychic torment across the sector. Lyra climbed the gantry, her white hair glowing in the blue light of the core. She plugged in a data spike Sayla had prepared, a virus designed not to destroy but to restore, to revert the graphs to their original purpose. Connection, not control. Alarms blared. Syndicate enforcers stormed the chamber. Torin stood at the base of the gantry, pulse rifle in hand, shielding her. "Hurry! I'm trying!" she shouted, fingers flying over the interface. "It's fighting me." Then, a voice echoed through the chamber. Not from a speaker, but from the core itself. A chorus of whispers, thousands of voices speaking as one. The voices of those whose memories had been harvested for the grafts. Soldiers, civilians, children. They weren't screaming. They were singing an old Zyrian lullaby, the same one Sayla sang. The enforcers froze. One dropped his weapon, tears streaming down his face. Another sank to his knees, whispering a name, Mira, over and over. Lyra's eyes widened. It's working. They're remembering, feeling. She pressed the final command. The core flared not with destruction, but with light. A wave of golden energy pulsed outward, silent and swift, washing over the station, over the fleet, over Zyrus below. Not pain, not fear, understanding. In the aftermath, the Syndicate didn't surrender. They dissolved. Commanders abandoned their posts. Soldiers walked away, some heading home, others seeking forgiveness. The weapon was gone. Not destroyed, but transformed into a beacon, broadcasting empathy across the stars like a lighthouse calling lost ships home. Torin and Lyra returned to Varello's Hollow not as heroes, but as family. The village rebuilt, stronger this time. They opened the greenhouse domes to off-world refugees, humans, Zyrians, even former Syndicate medics seeking redemption. Sayla taught them how to grow food in frozen soil. Torin taught them how to fix what was broken. And Lyra? She became the keeper of the Sky Anchor network, a system of relays and signals designed not for war, but for connection, ensuring no one would be left behind in the dark again. One evening, as snow began to fall once more, the three of them sat on the roof of their shelter, wrapped in thick furs, watching the auroras dance across the sky, ribbons of green and gold, like living breath. "You ever think about leaving?" Lyra asked Torin softly. He looked at her, then at Sayla, then at the village below, lights glowing, voices rising in song, smoke curling from chimneys into the starlit air. "No," he said, "I think I've finally found what I was searching for." And in that quiet moment, beneath a sky full of stars and snow, the tiny alien girl who once dug through trash for her mother's sake leaned her head on the human man's shoulder and smiled. Spring came late to Zyrus, as it always did. But when it arrived, it did so with quiet insistence. The snows receded from the lower slopes of the valley, revealing patches of stubborn moss and the first silver shoots of ice bloom flowers. The air, once sharp enough to draw blood from breath, softened into something almost gentle, carrying the scent of thawing earth, warm synthwood smoke, and the faint, sweet tang of greenhouse herbs. In that season of renewal, something else began to bloom between Sayla and Torin. Slowly, carefully, like a seed pushing through frozen ground. It wasn't declared in grand words or dramatic gestures. There were no vows beneath auroras or promises whispered in starlight. Instead, it grew in the spaces between. In the way Torin lingered after helping Sayla repair a cracked irrigation line, his hands brushing hers as they passed a wrench. In the way Sayla saved him the last cup of root tea each evening, knowing he liked it strong and bitter, just as she did. In the shared silence as they watched Lyra race across the melting ice on repurposed skiff runners, her laughter echoing off the canyon walls. At first, they both resisted it. Torin told himself he was a wanderer by nature, a man built for escape, not entanglement. He'd loved once, long ago, on a dusty moon near the belt, and that love had ended in fire and static. He carried the memory like shrapnel in his chest, and he feared adding another scar. Selah, for her part, had buried her heart long before the wars, long before hunger and cold had carved lines into her face. Her husband, a gentle botanist like her, had vanished during the first corporate purges, taken for refusing to weaponize his crop strains. She'd mourned him in silence for years, raising Lyra alone, her love reserved for her daughter and the fragile green things she coaxed from dead soil. To open that door again felt like tempting the void. But love, when it is real, does not ask permission. Simply arrives and waits. One evening, as the last of the day's light bled into violet across the snowfields, Torin found Selah in the greenhouse dome, kneeling beside a tray of sprouting sky moss. Her hands were stained with soil, her white hair tied back with a strip of cloth. She didn't look up as he entered, but she smiled. "You're late," she said. The skiff's coil needed rewinding. Again. Lyra said you were teaching her how to bypass Syndicate encryption. She's better at it than I am. Selah finally looked at him. She gets that from you. Torin frowned. I'm not her father. No, Selah agreed softly. But you're something just as important. The words hung between them, fragile as a frost flower. Torin swallowed. I don't know how to be what you might need. Selah rose, brushing dirt from her knees. She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her amber eyes, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her skin despite the dome's chill. I don't need a savior, she said. I don't need a hero. I need someone who sees me. Not the botanist, not the refugee, not even the mother. Just me. And you do. He reached out, slowly, as if she might vanish like mist. His fingers touched the back of her hand, rough against her smooth green skin. I see you, he whispered. I've seen you since the first night you drank broth like it was a sacrament. She turned her hand and laced her fingers through his. Then stay. Not forever. Not always. Just stay. A single word, heavy with trust. That night, they sat by the heater long after Lyra had fallen asleep, talking. Not about the past, but about the future. About rebuilding the old seed vaults. About installing solar collectors on the North Ridge. About teaching the village children to read both star charts and soil pH. Their dreams, once solitary, began to weave together like vines. Lyra noticed, of course. Children always do. One morning, she found them sharing a single blanket on the porch, watching the sunrise. She didn't say anything. She just placed 2 cups of steaming tea on the bench between them and went to feed the ice chickens. Later, she asked Torin, Are you going to marry her? He nearly choked on his tea. That's not for me to decide. But you love her. It wasn't a question. Torin looked toward the greenhouse, where Selah was pruning vines. Yes, he admitted. I do. Good, Lyra said, as if that settled everything. Because I already call you Papa, in my head. Torin's eyes stung. He pulled her into a rough hug. You're too smart for your own good, says the man who cried when I gave him a rock. It was a sky anchor, he muttered, but he was smiling. The village, too, began to treat them as a pair. Old Marna slipped Torin extra dumplings. For your woman. The ice fishers invited them both to the spring thaw ceremony. Even the former Syndicate medic, now tending the clinic, nodded at them with something like respect. Then came the day the off-world delegation arrived. A sleek diplomatic cruiser landed in the upper valley. Emissaries from the Interstellar Concord, sent to investigate the empathy anomaly that had rippled through Station K7. They wanted answers. They wanted the core. They wanted control. Torin and Selah stood together at the village gate to meet them, Lyra at their side. The lead envoy, a tall human with polished boots and a voice like chilled steel, demanded to speak with the architect of the neural event. That would be her, Torin said, nodding to Lyra. The envoy blinked. A child. She's the one who activated the restoration protocol, Selah said calmly. But the empathy matrix was never ours to give. It belongs to everyone it touched. The envoy frowned. The Concord intends to secure it for study. For the greater good. The greater good doesn't lock up compassion, Torin said. It spreads it. Tension thickened the air. The envoy's guards shifted, hands near their sidearms. Then Selah stepped forward. If you want to understand what happened here, don't take our technology. Take our story. And so, over the next 3 days, the villagers shared not data but lives. They showed the envoys how they grew food in frozen soil, how they healed with lichen and song, how they turned enemies into neighbors with nothing but truth and a cup of tea. Lyra demonstrated the Sky Anchor network. Torin explained how empathy had disarmed an army without a single shot fired. On the final evening, the envoy sat with Sayla and Torin by the communal fire. "You've built something rare here," he admitted. "Not a fortress. A home." "We didn't build it alone," Sayla said. The envoy nodded. "The Concord will withdraw its claim, but we'd like to share your methods with other worlds. With permission." Torin looked at Sayla. She looked at him. Then they both looked at Lyra, who was roasting marshroot on a stick nearby, grinning. "Yes," Sayla said, "but only if it's offered, not imposed." "Agreed." When the cruiser departed, the village celebrated with a feast under the stars. Music filled the air, Zyrian flutes and human harmonicas playing the same tune. Torin and Sayla danced, awkwardly at first, then with growing ease, their steps sinking like two rivers meeting. Later, beneath the auroras, Torin took Sayla's hands in his. "I never thought I'd find a place where I belonged," he said. "You didn't find a place," she replied. "You found us." He kissed her then, not with passion but with promise. A quiet vow written in breath and touch. And from the porch, Lyra watched, wrapped in her Sky Anchor blanket, her heart full. She no longer searched trash for food. She no longer feared the dark. Because now, she had a father who taught her to fly, a mother who taught her to grow, and a home that glowed like a star in the snow. And in that moment, as love bloomed beneath alien skies, the universe felt not vast and cold, but small, warm, and whole. Years passed, as they always do, sometimes slowly, like the first melt of winter ice, sometimes in a rush, like wind through canyon walls. But in Varello's Hollow, time settled into a rhythm as steady and warm as a heartbeat. The scars of war faded, not forgotten, but softened by green shoots and shared laughter. And at the heart of it all stood a home. Not grand, not gilded, but built with care, filled with light, and rooted in love. Torin and Sayla were married on the first day of true spring, when the ice blooms opened their silver petals to the sun and the sky shimmered with the last of the auroras. There was no grand ceremony, no off-world dignitaries or ancient rites, just the villagers gathered in the greenhouse dome, now overflowing with vines and fruiting moss, as Lyra, wearing a crown of woven skygrass, placed their hands together and said, "You've already promised each other 1,000 times. Today we just bear witness." And they did. Old Marna wept into her apron. The former Syndicate medic played a lullaby on a flute carved from scrap metal. Even the ice chickens clucked in approval. Afterward, they feasted on roasted tubers, spiced synth noodles, and the first honey from the hive Lyra had nurtured all winter. Torin, who had once slept in derelict freighters with one eye open, now fell asleep each night with Sayla's head on his chest and Lyra's small snores drifting from the next room. He stopped dreaming of fire. Instead, he dreamed of gardens, of star charts drawn in the dirt, of a daughter calling him Papa without hesitation. Sayla, once so guarded her heart seemed locked behind ice, bloomed like the greenhouse she tended. She laughed more, deep, rich sounds that startled even her. She taught Torin the old Zyrian songs, and he taught her earth ballads about rivers and lost dogs. They argued over irrigation schedules and whose turn it was to fix the heater, but always made up over shared tea and quiet touches. A hand on a shoulder, a brush of fingers while passing tools. Lyra grew tall and quick-witted, her white hair always escaping its braid, her green skin glowing with health. She became the village's youngest sky archivist, maintaining the empathy network that now linked Zyrus to a dozen other recovering worlds. She never forgot the days of hunger, but she refused to let them define her. Instead, she used them as fuel to build, to connect, to protect. Together, the three of them turned their shelter into a school, then a clinic, then a beacon for wanderers seeking more than survival, seeking belonging. Refugees came, not just from war-torn colonies, but from lonely stations and broken ships, drawn by rumors of a place where empathy was not weakness, but strength. And Torin, Sayla, and Lyra welcomed them all. On quiet evenings, they sat on their porch, watching the stars will overhead. Sometimes they spoke. Sometimes they didn't need to. The silence between them was full of understanding, of gratitude, of a love that had been tested by frost and fire and had chosen, every time, to stay. They never claimed to have all the answers. The universe was still vast, still dangerous. But they had built something rare. A life not just endured, but cherished. A family not by blood alone, but by choice, by courage, by countless small acts of kindness. And so, beneath the endless sky of Xyrus, in a village warmed by geothermal vents and human hearts, they lived, not perfectly but happily. Not forever in years, perhaps, but forever in the way that matters. With open hands, open doors, and love that never stopped growing. For in the end, that was the greatest rebellion of all.